Welcome everybody. Today, my name is Michael French. I'm a principal consultant here at Pragmatic Works, and we're going to talk today about controlling project chaos using Azure DevOps. And of course, my mouse isn't working. A little bit about me. I've got over 20 years of IT experience, actually probably going on 30 if I were to count it. But during that time, I've seen, I'm on my third transformation. When I got started in my career where everybody was transforming, this whole new client server thing, and, then this fad called the internet showed up, and so, relational databases were there. Then the next transformation started getting into business intelligence and enterprise data warehouses. And now we're on our third transformation is the way I see it, and that's everything's getting migrated to the cloud. That's a good thing. It's an exciting time to be in our industry, but then again, it always is to me. Got a Bachelor of Science in Applied Mathematics from Kent State University in Ohio. I'm also a frequent presenter with our Azure Data Weeks, which you saw on the splash screens coming into the presentation, and SQL Saturday presenters. I'm based here in Atlanta, so I most often present in Atlanta. I'm a strong believer in giving back to your community in a non-technical manner, so I volunteer in the community. I'm on my national board of directors with my fraternity, get to see interesting things with college campuses and how that affects us. And then I'm also more local, volunteer with the Boy Scouts of America, longtime volunteer there. So I feel it's important to give back to the community and not just a technical manner. How many of you get these questions from your management, from your team? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? How about now? Well, you said I promised my managers, or I promised the executives that it'd be done. Well, when's it going to be done? This one came right from one of my clients. How do I know you are making progress? I don't want to show up at the end of the project and not have something useful. So how do I know that? This is always the next question is always a good one. Do you need more time? Well, as a consultant, this is a positive question or a negative question. Absolutely, we need more time, and here's the documentation why. Let's sign a change order. Or the other way you hear it from the negative side is, what do you mean you need more time? And those are the harder conversations to have. And then this is one of my favorite ones, and one of my teammates brought out the old Columbo line, where everything's getting wrapped up, and said, hey, just one more thing, help me understand. And and that is a good way to encapsulate, oh, what if you need more? What do you want more? There's more that needs to be done. So the goals of this presentation is to get you in a place where you can answer these questions effectively. We're going to talk about a process we've been using. It's called iterative development. It's a kind of a modified Agile approach. And then I'm going to show you how to use Azure DevOps to support that iterative development process. And finally, I'll actually show you a sample project that I put together. So all those questions that we asked at the beginning are evidence of chaos. Chaos in your project. So how do we wrangle that chaos? As I said, we're going to use a process called iterative development. We're going to talk about sprint planning and team capacity. I'm going to facilitate user acceptance throughout the entirety of the project, not just at the end. If you get to the end and people don't like what you built, it's your fault, not theirs. Like the last point said, control, oh, just one more thing. Well, how do we control scope creep? You can't control it if you can't quantify it. So we're going to show you how to quantify the scope creep. And first and foremost is improved communications. Who are we communicating with? We're communicating with our dev team. We're communicating with our management. And this is true even if you're a team of one. You're communicating to somebody. Whether you're internal, a consultant, or a contractor, you need to communicate progress to what you're doing. Somebody's paying the bill for the services you're providing. Azure DevOps is one of the ways that we're going to do that. So what is iterative development? This is a process, and it's not just theoretical. This is how we've run multiple projects that I've been on. This is almost my preferred method. I say it's agile based because you're going to see a lot of agile type terminologies, and I'll use iterative development and sprints, iterations and sprints the same. We're still going to have we're still going to have a lot of elements of agile, meaning we're not doing waterfall. We're not going to the beginning, defining every single requirement before any development begins. I've had some of my projects where that's not an easy thing for them to understand, for the management to understand, because they are used to waterfall. So we're still going to have the concept of sprints. We're going to have 3-week sprints. I've been on projects where we've done 2-week sprints, and that's acceptable too. You're never, unless you're really a sucker for punishment, you don't want to do a 1-week sprint. If you're doing anything over a 3-week sprint, now it's no longer a sprint. Now we're into middle distance running, and well, you need to reassess the amount of work that can get done. 3 weeks from my colleagues' experience seems to be a good amount of time to get a fair amount of work done. The team members. As buying from Agile, it's not just the development team who's a member of the iterative development. You also have a stakeholder. You also have members of the business. And it's trying to widen the base. We don't want to be developing in a silo. We need communications. We're going to talk about sprint planning. In theory, Agile says, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do in the next sprint because I got to have it solely based upon what I did in the last sprint. We're going to do a little bit of top-down planning first, and then based upon that higher level plan, now we'll plan those 3-week sprints and who's doing what. And another aspect drawn from Agile and iterative development is that daily stand-up meeting. This is key. This is where, some people call it a scrum meeting. It is literally, you stand up for 15 minutes, everybody says, and we'll get into it, how those should be running. But it's imperative from a communication standpoint that those daily stand-up meetings happen. I know everybody's heard this term before, but as a youth, 11-year-old me saw this sign or something similar to it. It was handwritten in our scout hut. And the message is that if we fail to plan, that time you're making the once per sprint, we got to make the sausage. Who should attend this sprint planning meeting? And it only happens once per sprint, usually at the end of the sprint. Every developer attends the meeting. Every project manager attends the meeting. The tech lead runs the meeting. And the business stakeholder very much should be attending this meeting because they're the ones who are doing it. So what's the content of the sprint planning meeting? Everybody says what was done last sprint. And this is by developer, by the task. We look at the work that was completed. Then, if work that was planned in a sprint wasn't completed, then we need to know if it's moving to the next sprint and why it's moving to the next sprint. It's holding everybody accountable. After everything gets moved to the next sprint, then we talk about what will be done in the next sprint, because we moved the task we didn't complete, and now we have to add in the extra work. Team capacity. We'll show you in the demo how Azure DevOps allows you to actually quantify the team capacity by person, by hours, and you'll be able to determine in a 3-week block of time if you can get done everything that you want to get done. Part of the reason that this is so important is that you need to avoid overloaded sprints. I've been on projects where the client just says, oh, I don't care, just get it done. Well, we got to do this in the next, we got to get this one done, we got to get this one done. And when you look at the hours on a project plan or a capacity plan, you realize, well, there's no way that that can get done. And it kind of violates the principle of making sure you've got a solid block of a reasonable amount of work that gets done. There's no reason to overload your sprint because it's just going to move tasks into the next sprint. And it accumulates over time and ends up delaying your whole project. The idea of a 3-week sprint, the idea of the planning meeting is to just plan the next sprint. It's important, and then this is the top-down approach. We have to have a sprint plan, a sprint zero. There is an overall task planning that has to happen. In other words, we have an SOW, or you have a project charter if you're internal, and you know about what it is you want to do. Sprint zero allows you some time to get the team staffed up. If you're internal, maybe you're wrapping up another project. If you're external, or if you're a contractor, or you're trying to get people onto the project, there's a little bit of lag time, but it doesn't mean we don't have to have progress. We're going to sit down with the building, with the project charter, with the stakeholders and with the business, and we're going to start putting together user stories, and I'll explain what user stories are. And we're not necessarily going to task them out. Those user stories are how we get to where we're going. Tasks live at the user stories. And we can estimate user stories by complexity. Generally, when I'm doing an estimation of a project, we talk about small, medium, or large efforts. And in DevOps, I give you a way to attach the story points to a user story without actually putting hours to tasks. I was reading one article and it was talking about, well, how do you effectively do it? Is it small, and is medium 2 smalls, is a large 3 mediums? It's just that, if we're just doubling. And the user estimation, the author of the article was talking about using more of a Fibonacci series, which, going back to your math background, all you have to do is picture a Nautilus shell. 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 2 = 3, 2 + 3 = 5, and so on through the series. So for user story estimation, those story points, a small would equate to 1 or 2 points. A medium would equate to 3 to 5 points. And a complex would be 8 to 13 points. That's a pretty complex user story. If you start going beyond 13 story points, you might want to consider breaking it into smaller, into 2 different user stories. It's an estimation. Then, once we have our user stories created, we can get into our sprint planning. In other words, what are we going to do on sprint 1? Who's doing it? And the most important, stakeholder sign-off. The business was included in the process from day 1. And we just developed the path to get there, and they went, okay, sounds good. When you start out on a journey, you pick an endpoint, and then, if you're driving, Waze follows, comes in with a plan that can get updated in real time. But having that stakeholder know right up front that they have buy into the plan is part of that improved communication and how you control chaos. User acceptance. We're going to do user acceptance from sprint 1. And this is where we start to buy from Agile. If the people are included from the beginning, you've got better buy-in from the business. Increased end user adoption. Because the person who helps develop it, not the technical person, but from the business side who understands it, can tell all their colleagues, hey, they took our opinions into consideration. Hey, I've watched them build this. Hey, this stuff works. You'll end up with better data, a business certified data. I sat in one Sprint 0 meeting with the business, and we had all the business leaders and said, okay, what do you want? And the finance guy says, I want everybody to understand net revenue as I understand net revenue. Sales sees net revenue another way. Procurement sees net revenue their way, and nobody agrees. And I said, great, you're on the finance department. This is financial data. How about you jump in on every task, and we'll minimize your time. But if you certify the data, then everybody else kind of has to use it, regardless of how they came up with their numbers, because it is business certified data, not just technical data. We increase end user adoption, and we get that user acceptance if they're involved in the process, because we're delivering what the business wants. We're not doing cool technology just for fun. We're not doing what IT wants to do. We're helping solve a business problem, not just a technology problem. Not just a technology problem. Back to that overall stakeholder, we are going to have documented stakeholder sign-off every step of the way at the key points. So again, we're not waiting till the end. Every sprint will include tasks for this. We talked about that scope creep. Because we do a sprint planning meeting every 3 weeks, along the process, new requirements come into play. It's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. So we create user stories and we estimate the user stories for them. And they can get added in and they're documented so we don't lose requirements. What do the effect of bugs and bug fixes have on the overall process? We'll be able to put bugs in the same place as the tasks and assign tasks to them. And that way you can see if part of your dev team still has full development responsibility, but then you're overloading them because you're giving them bug mediation. You gotta remediate this set of bugs. Well, now all of a sudden you might be overloading your dev team. So you'll be able to see and determine the effect of the bug fixes. Where does it fit on the timeline? Is it going to fit within the goals? Suppose we got a 6 months project and we got a bunch of new requirements or a bunch of bug fixes. There's still only so many hours to go around. So are we still going to hit our timeline goals? If we can't hit our timeline goals, then we're going to be asking somebody for an extension, or we're going to be asking for more hours. It's an easier question to answer, and it's easier to have the discussion if you can point to say, okay, well, you got new requirements, or the bug rate's a little high, or you want to do more, and that's a good thing. So we can control that chaotic point of scope creep because it's documented in the process. Extensions and more hours, maybe we need to add a development resource to get the amount of work done requested. It's not a bad thing, but we will be able to justify it. What are some of the other benefits of using Azure DevOps to control your project? Well, first and foremost is your GitHub integration. Azure DevOps grew up from Team Foundation system. Prior to that, it was source safe. Ultimately, we're building code. So that source code, we want it to be managed. All pieces of the code needs to be managed. And this is where GitHub comes into play. So, from a technical aspect, that repository gets set up and everybody has to check in their code every night before they're done. Everybody wakes up in the morning and syncs their code base, so everybody's working on the same code. So that GitHub integration, that you can also see from a code churn standpoint. If somebody says they're working on a task, you should be able to see artifacts changing or things changing on the other side in GitHub. You can tack specific development requests to specific code changes. That's where you get from the GitHub integration. If you're managing a dev team, you want to know about the code churn. The task workflow history is a real benefit because the developer, if they have questions, they can tag the team members in the question. You see where the question was answered, you see the descriptions, you see the definitions, and then if a task is if a developer is done with a task, instead of them closing it out, they can transfer the task to the testing department or to the BA to certify the data or to certify the results. And that chain of custody is all documented. So if somebody looks at it, they'll say, okay, there's the due diligence is done. We maintain team direction. This is a big one. You know, we always talk about, you know, running the train off the rails, or, you know, everybody's running down the road and then all of a sudden, whoops, you're in a ditch. Well, if we're using DevOps and, you know, we've got a source repository, you might swerve here and there, but for the most part, you're going to keep the team heading in the same direction, working on the same things. Outliers will quickly show up. We talked about the bug tracking and the effects on the project plan, but it gives you the ability to prioritize as well. Let the business decide. Say, okay, we've got X, Y, and Z and A and B. Well, maybe they want X and B and they don't want the other 3 to get done. So, you know, it allows you to have an open conversation, and everybody's used to having the conversation. So it shouldn't be an uncomfortable conversation. So that is a strong overview of the process that we call iterative development. Again, not theoretical. This is how we run projects. Next up, I'm going to talk about how Azure DevOps fits into all of this. You know, and this is the basics of that project planning. If you go out to Microsoft and you look at DevOps, it's very configurable. You can do multiple types of project management styles or philosophies. What I'm going to talk about is based upon their Agile template. You've heard me talking about user stories. So let's start at the top. An epic, an example of an epic. I want to analyze sales. It's pretty broad. Not sure what it is we're going to do with that, but we'll figure it out. And then, hold on, I lost something on my, I'm having a technology malfunction. No, there we go. So epics have features. I want to analyze the profitability of my sales. Or I want to analyze my customers based upon sales. Now we're starting to, you know, quantify more what it means to say what I want to analyze sales. Examples of user stories. I want to capture data about my customers. Or I want to capture data about my products. I want to capture my point of sale data. In other words, these are all examples of things that I have to do if I want to analyze my profitability. We talk about tasks. User stories have tasks. This is where the hours live. This is where the rubber meets the road. Here are, you know, tasks should be, you know, no more than 24 hours. That's a big task. Should be, some people would say it shouldn't be any more than 8. But they don't have to be that long. But if you have a task that's going more than 24 hours, create 2 tasks, split it in 2. You're trying to do too much in one, and you're trying to eat the elephant in too big of a bite. So examples of tasks. I'm going to design my customer dimension. I need to create a source for my customer dimension. Somebody needs to verify the source to target mapping for that customer dimension. Oh, now we get to the dev task, create an ELT for a customer dimension, or certify the customer data. You'll see this pattern constantly. This involves a lot of people into the process. It's just not a developer going, well, that's what he said. Okay, the customer comes from this table and I'm just gonna create it. So the tasks are where the rubber meets the road. Bugs are used to track issues, and you can also assign tasks to bugs. That's how we quantify. From Microsoft, there's more that you can add into it, but we're just going to keep focusing on that portfolio backlog. And it's the product backlog that is the user story and task that is the basis of the sprint planning meeting. But everybody on the team updates their tasks every day. You can get fancy and you can start adding test plans into all of that. So it just depends on your team. But we're just going to focus on the left side here: epics, features, user stories, and tasks. That is the basis of the Azure DevOps and how we're going to use it to support iterative development. Now I'm going to get ready to go into the demo. A little basis of the demo. The demo is for a project called Event Driven ELT. This is a webinar I gave as part of Azure Data Week. This is how we use, Logic Apps, Azure Data Factory. There's a lot of good technical pieces in there to build a cloud-driven ELT system. So the project plan you're going to see follows that pattern. It's also the type of project that this is, and your project doesn't matter what type, but this is just what I'm showing you. It's a typical enterprise data warehouse and BI reporting project. Following a Kimball-based design for the enterprise data warehouse. It's actually, the first two chapters of, the data warehouse toolkit and, what they suggest for dimensions and fact tables. We're going to show the team composition. Then at the end, this is really exciting. Microsoft has started adding a Power BI connector directly to DevOps. So I can create a Power BI report that connects live to the Azure DevOps and everything that we're doing. And now we can communicate with all sorts of people without them ever having to take a look at the complexity of having a license for Azure DevOps or even knowing what Azure DevOps is. But that Power BI reporting, it's in beta. So I can't show you doing much, but I can show you doing something. Let me switch on over to the demo. Make sure that you guys are seeing. Okay. So this is Azure DevOps from the portal. So this is cloud-based in Azure. We get an overview of the project. I'm going to talk about our team members here in a minute and the roles that we're going to be playing. The interesting thing that I had to do here is I actually have to invite real people. So these are my team members who've worked on projects with me in varying capacity. And I'll tell you what member they're playing. There's myself as will put me in as the tech lead. I've got Katie Thomas in there. She's a project manager for us, and she's going to be playing the role of BA on this project. Andy Letourneau is one of our senior consultants, and she helps with getting it all done. She's one of our developer extraordinaires in Azure Data Factory and Logic Apps and Power BI. She's the one that tells me I'm wrong, and I have to listen to it and believe her and figure out what I did wrong. Alan Faulkner is a senior principal consultant likewise, him and I have done this type of project, this type of methodology, and he's going to be playing the role of developer. And finally, Paul Turley, who's a Microsoft MVP, one of our consultants, a principal consultant as well. He's in the Power BI sector, and I've got him playing the role of that business, that embedded business resource. You'll see that we've got 100 work items already in play. One of the things that I want to show you is if we go to the project settings, we got to put dates to things. We've got 3-week sprints. It's not an esoteric concept. Here are the days. And again, I used the iteration and sprints interchangeably, but we're going to call them iterations. So this is how we can document. And you'll see this is a 6-month project. So if I go back to the overview, you'll see buttons on the left where we're talking about boards and work items. There's repos, which is where your GitHub integration is, and then pipelines, test plans, and artifacts. I'm not going to talk about those. Where we're going to spend our time is in the backlog, on the boards. All of these tasks are, here's the user stories. Have the blue book in front of them. It's a story. It's like an open book. Tasks have check marks. Features have trophies. And the head of the food chain with the crown are the epics. So we just start putting all of this stuff in. Yes, I hand entered it. There are templates, there's things you can do. Well, how do these all relate and what do they do for us? We talk about the backlog. This is where most of what is the basis of where you're going to be talking. You talk about backlog grooming. Well, you can see the tasks and the epics and the features. You can see what's currently being worked on and what's in active development, what's coming up. And again, you'll see, for sales, I got to have a date dimension, product dimension. These are just things that we do. We are going to analyze the demand for the inventory. We're going to talk about marketing, but we don't yet have user stories defined for it. We don't have everything set up, because maybe this is all we thought we could do in 6 months. We may be able to do more, but we're capturing more requirements that, we can build on for future work. The pattern that you're going to see is here's create the source. I'll show it better from the sprints. Create the source, create the target, verify the source to target mapping, get buy-in from the stakeholders before any development begins. Once that's given, you said, okay, then develop it. And then did we develop what they asked for? So this is the overall backlog. You'll also be able to see that things are unassigned. Right now, where we're at in the project, we're almost halfway through sprint 2. So I'm going to show you from sprint 1 the work that we know that we did. This is where, we can, like I said, the rubber meets the road. Our BA, our business analyst, she was able to create the source for the dimension. Our developer created the target. Then our BA went back. Then our BA went back and verified that the source to target mapping is correct. Then our stakeholder documented acceptance of what we're about to build. Alan turned around, completed it for the date dimension. We always have a date dimension. And then Paul, the business representing the business, certified that yes, that date dimension is correct and it fits what we need to do. From square one, we've got certified data. Each piece is certified. There's always a set of infrastructure things that have to get done. Again, this is a fictitious project, but it shows who did it, how it got done. Alan completed the Success Logic app and passed everything back to me, and I said, okay, as the tech lead, yeah, I agree, Alan did. So it facilitates a tech review. So let's take a look at iteration 2. Here's what we're actively working on. This gets interesting. A user story almost always has at least these 6 tasks. We're trying to get our customer data. We can see that the customer data is in process. Alan's in active development, so Paul could not have done the certification yet. Same with the product data. We're nowhere near completion on that, but we can see the completed hours versus the remaining hours, and you can see who has what left to complete. Same pattern holds true. So remember I talked about team capacity? This is where by person, generally you have hours per day that they're working. If you've got a dedicated developer, they're probably on 6 to 8 hours a day. Our BA probably has multiple duties, and she can only give us 2 hours a day to this project, just to this project. As a tech lead, I've got 3 hours that I'm expected to put towards this project a day. And then our business guy, well, we really want him involved, and half of his job is going to be on 4 hours a day. Realistically, our BA is going to be at 4, and our business person is going to be at 2. But we can factor into the plan if people personally have days off, or suppose it's a holiday, a company holiday, we can add in for the whole team. This gives us the ability to quantify the amount of work that we're requesting to be done and our capability to actually perform that work. So we get into the analytics. This is the burn down chart. This is one of the things that is reviewed at the end of every morning stand-up meeting. Give it a little chance to show up. And it shows as a team, what our capacity is, what people have got done, and where we are in the line, showing your ideal times. Again, this graph is it's a way of making sure that work's getting done. Everybody has to update their tasks as the last thing they do in the day, so you know where the hours are going. So this tells you if you're on target by sprint, getting to the end. That's the completed work. This will show you where the original estimates were. And that's one of the expectations that we have. Just because somebody estimates their tasks, and we can do, the developers can estimate their tasks, or whoever the certification, the person doing the work has the opportunity to estimate the task. Right now, we don't issue a penalty for going against the estimate. The original estimate is just that. But we need to track the work completed and the work remaining. And that's what drives the numbers here. And I'll show you. I'll go back for a minute. an example of a task, an active task. Andy's in the middle of developing the pipelines and the logic apps, and you say it was for the product dimension. Every day she'd go in here and make an entry in the discussion and say, okay, there's still, of the original 24, there's still 10 remaining. She has worked 14. So over multiple days, this is how that burned out chart keeps getting built. There should never be a penalty for remaining work against, the actuals versus estimates. Just because somebody estimated it wrong isn't the fault of the developer. However, if developers are building their tasks out for the user stories, have them be mindful of that. So, whether or not you don't want anybody to be overestimating and over sandbagging. You'll see that there's, I get a pattern into how long each of these should take. All right, that's the analytics. And I'm starting to run out of time. So the last piece that I promised to show you, I just want to get this remaining work in here. I'll let you play with that. Here is a Power BI report based upon that project that we just have. If I show you the recent sources right here, you will see that my data source is that Dev Azure event-driven ELT. So if I were to refresh the data, and I'm not going to because it'll take too much time, it will go out and get the data set and increase it. So this is just a simple sample report of tasks in the last 30 days, because this is our data set, and who they're assigned to. And it's by iteration. So we'll see that Paul has some tasks that are not yet assigned to an iteration. Paul representing our business. We'll see what he was able to close. And in our current iteration, we'll see active things that he's been able to close, new stuff that isn't there yet. So this could be useful in greater communication to everybody. This is sample reports that they put up. There's bugs, the stories, tasks, work items. I expect that they'll be adding more information as they expose that data model. So that is the demo of how Power BI connects directly into DevOps. So as we wrap up, we've talked about controlling chaos with Azure DevOps. It's iterative development, following a process that we know works. Using Azure DevOps to help control that chaos. Use the tools that are available to you as the basics of the project planning. And finally, I was able to show you the demo of how it all worked. So with that, I'll open up to questions, Crystal. If you could proctor those, please.
All right, Michael, let me see what questions you have in this panel here. Let me go up a little bit. How do you assign tasks to a specific iteration?
Okay. I'll just show you that. That's, no, we're still on that capacity. Staff data, we're pretty sure that over the next week and a half that we're not going to be able to deliver staff data to the business. So, we won't have it ready for Paul to certify. So in the iteration, we pick iteration 3. And you'll notice that I have all of my iterations available there. We add in the comment.
The next question is.
We save it, and there it goes. Yeah.
Can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The next question is, will you be able to share with us the Azure DevOps templates you have demonstrated today?
Probably not. That's part of the things that we do as Pragmatic Works. When you hire us, this is the process that we've followed and developed. It's pretty generic, though.
All right. The next question is, from the burn down chart, can you explain what metrics shows you are on target versus off target?
Pull this back up. It takes a little bit of time to render. The green line shows your capacity. This line shows you what it is, ideally based upon the team capacity. When this blue line gets above here, and what you have left to do, we generally look at completed work. It's when the shaded blue area starts going outside the gray line, the green line. I'll put it back up in a minute. That's when you know you're starting to run behind. There's too much work or not enough work's getting completed. A lot of projects, this blue shaded area here, we've got 49 hour scope, there's 43 remaining. I was on one project, remember we talking about overloaded sprints? The business wasn't necessarily holding up their end of the bargain and we had to move forward. So our shaded blue area kept being up here. It wasn't necessarily burning down. Every member of the team, including the stakeholders, if you have hours on the project, it need to be accounted for.
All right, let me jump to the next question here. How do we get the pre-packaged reports for Power BI?
Just connect. That was just directly as I connected to Power BI. As I connected DevOps or Power BI to DevOps using their connector, that's what showed up. It's in beta, so they'll tell you when you connect, hey, whenever it goes GA, it might not include any of these, it might include more. that was what was pre-built. I didn't build any of it. I just picked a couple of data fields and created a Power BI report.
All right, the next question is, I think I was that all of them. Let's see. Might be the rest of them. Okay. What is the recommended best practice for the number of projects within a single Azure DevOps organization? Single project with multiple teams and boards versus multiple projects. We hear the multiple project approach introduces an additional administrative security workload.
I'd have to do a little research and get back to him on that.
Let's see. How do we connect to the data model from DevOps?
It would be done through your GitHub integration, through the repos. So right here is where that would be done. And the repo doesn't have to be a GitHub. It could be, whichever. But this is where you start getting to how the build is getting into play, how your code gets synced. So the repo is created whether or not it's TFS or some other ones, or it's in Git.
Okay. Are there any best practices around how you capture capacity by resource? Is it done by activity, meaning more entries by resource, or single cumulative entry for a resource?
Let me get that up and running right here. It's literally by person, and what the contribution that's expected on a daily basis by the team members. It's important to have it accurate, because that's how you know that you're not overloading the sprint, that you're actually getting the amount of stuff done. Or maybe everybody has to pitch in this sprint and add in some overtime. That's acceptable too. Of course, it's going to be a little slow, but yeah, it's by person, by team member, by sprint.
All right. Can we set it up for the requester to get automatic notifications on the status of the work items?
Well, if you ask Andy, Katie, Allen, and Paul, they got spammed by about 100 different messages as I assigned to them. All of that that automatic notification goes into the workflow. So those happened. I imagine it's configurable.
All right. Can we draw an employee performance from Azure DevOps?
There's two answers to that question. The developer in me goes, yeah, I don't want to do this because you think I'm sandbagging. This isn't an employee performance tool. This is a project management tool that we're going to use to estimate hours. And if as long as you keep it to that, because you want to make sure that we're generating the most participation. You want everybody to participate in the process, because we need the numbers to change. So it's important from a technical aspect, but we want to make sure that we win as a team, we lose as a team, or we fail as a team. It shouldn't necessarily be an issue of employee performance. However, it can expose that maybe a conversation needs to be happening. What you could say as a tech lead, hey, I notice you're sandbagging a lot on your estimates. You're overestimating the work and you're coming in under, and it affects the whole team. So it's more about getting buy-in and, keeping it on positive. If you start attaching negative aspects to it, you'll lose the team's willingness to want to do the process. But that's my opinion.
Okay, let me jump down here a few more. Let's see. What status is available for a user story? How we move story from one status to another status?
Let's see if it's going to respond to me. Here's vendor data. This we know is going to be later in the sprint. It's a drop down. Active, resolved, closed, or removed. You can remove something from the sprint. So it's just as simple as that. This is an example. I might own the user story, but the work isn't planned. It's still in the project, in the product backlog. You see it's not assigned to a sprint yet. So it's still new.
All right. Let's see. Can you show the queries section of the screen? And then I'll do one more after that.
Work items I have to follow, work that's just assigned to me. These are out of the box ones. If your team requires different types of queries, you can certainly put them together. Bug reports, bugs assigned to me, those are common ones as well.
All right, I'm gonna read one more here. If you are a team of one or two, how should you add activity capacity? Do you add yourself multiple times?
No, if you're a team of one, you're the only resource. And I would still say that you have a boss or a tech lead or somebody that you're reporting to. Add them in. Never be an island, because we're trying to effectively do communication. So even if you're a solo developer, you still report to somebody. Let that person know what you're working on, and it keeps the lines of communication open. No, don't add yourself twice, because you're not going to do double the amount of work. Just add yourself once, and it'll help you, plan out your project better. Matter of fact, I'd say it's even more important to do it as a team of one, because it's increased transparency upon what you're working on.
All right. Okay. I think that's all we have time for today, guys. Kind of running 2 minutes after. We will I will put all these questions in a screenshot and I will get them over to Michael and we'll try to answer these later on in the blog. But if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Michael or myself. Michael, we want to thank you so much for hosting this webinar. We appreciate it.
Well, I want to thank everybody for attending it. It means a lot to me to put the work together to have you guys attend, so I appreciate everybody who attended.
Absolutely. And as for everybody else, I hope you guys have a good rest of your Tuesday. And like I said before, if you guys have any questions for me or Michael, please feel free to email us. This will also be in your email box tomorrow. You guys will receive a recording link to the video. So if you guys are looking for any other of our past webinars, they are all on our YouTube channel at Pragmatic Works. Thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you guys later. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Michael.